4 brutal outlaws entered the Silver Mist Tavern looking for trouble, mocking the quiet woman behind the bar. Instead, they found themselves facing Sarah Swift Steel Chen, the most feared blademaster across 3 nations. What followed would uncover an international smuggling operation, expose a corrupt governor's deadly secret, and bring down the largest criminal empire in the Pacific Northwest. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Thunder rumbled across the rain-soaked streets of Port Haven as Sarah Chen methodically polished glasses behind the weathered bar of the Silver Mist Tavern. Her movements were precise, economical, habits formed from years of ensuring nothing would hinder the lightning-fast blade work that had once made her legendary in another life. The evening crowd was thin, likely due to the approaching storm. A few regulars hunched over their card games in the corner, while old Thomas coaxed gentle melodies from the tavern's battered piano. Through the salt-streaked windows, Sarah watched Harbourmaster Phillips make his evening rounds, carefully avoiding eye contact with the tavern, another sign that something wasn't right with the port authorities. 2 months she'd been here watching, waiting, gathering information about the strange happenings in Port Haven, honest merchants being forced out of business, mysterious accidents at warehouses that refused to sell, and Chinese laborers disappearing without a trace. Mylin emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. The cook had become Sarah's closest ally in town, her eyes and ears among the Chinese workers who saw everything but were rarely noticed by the power brokers plotting Port Haven's future. More trouble coming, Mai whispered in Cantonese, a language few knew Sarah had mastered during her years hunting criminals through the ports of Hong Kong and Singapore. Black Dragon men, expensive suits, they're recruiting more fighters. Sarah's hand paused mid-polish, her keen ears picking up the approaching footsteps. The Black Dragons, hired killers masquerading as legitimate businessmen. They'd been showing up more frequently, testing boundaries, pressuring local merchants. Their reputation for ruthlessness had cleared their path up the coast, leaving broken lives and ruined businesses in their wake. Most folks only whispered about them, but Sarah had crossed paths with their kind before. The tavern's door burst open, letting in a gust of rain-laden wind as 4 men entered. Their expensive suits couldn't quite hide the predatory way they moved, the subtle bulges of hidden weapons. Sarah recognized their leader instantly, James Razor Reed, former prizefighter turned enforcer. His signature jade ring had been earned through 14 kills, each represented by a tiny notch carved into the stone. Behind him, his lieutenants spread out with practiced precision. Wolf Chen, no relation, Sarah noted wryly, covered the back. Dr. While Quick Blade Murphy drifted toward the stairs, cutting off any escape route. The 4th man, a hulking brute Sarah didn't recognize, positioned himself near the piano, causing old Thomas to falter mid-note. If you're enjoying this tale of hidden identities and deadly skills, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's episode reveals a secret that will change everything. Evening, miss, Reed drawled, sliding onto a bar stool with calculated grace. His smile never reached his cold eyes as he surveyed the tavern. Heard tell this place serves the finest whiskey north of San Francisco. Sarah set down her cleaning rag, keeping her movements casual despite the tension humming through her body. Years of experience had taught her to read men like Reed, to note the subtle tells that preceded violence, the way his right hand kept, straying toward his jacket, how his men maintained clear lines of sight to each entry point. They weren't here for drinks. We serve whiskey, she replied evenly. Whether it's the finest depends on the drinker's taste. Murphy snorted, moving closer to examine the knife collection mounted on the wall. Vintage pieces Sarah had carefully selected to appear decorative rather than practical. His expert gaze lingered too long on certain blades, assessing their quality with professional interest. "Nice collection. Your late husband's, I assume." "Just appreciating history," Sarah replied, noting how his hand kept straying to his own weapon, a distinctive butterfly knife with pearl inlays. She'd heard stories about that knife, about how fast it could appear in Murphy's hand when trouble started, but she'd seen faster, been faster. Maylin appeared in the kitchen doorway, her dark eyes meeting Sarah's briefly. A silent warning passed between them. They'd witnessed this pattern before in other ports. First came the polite visits, then the suggestions, and finally the threats, all part of a carefully orchestrated campaign to convince locals that selling their businesses to the Black Dragons was in their best interest. Through the windows, the storm gathered strength over Port Haven's dark waters. Sarah felt the weight of her own knives, carefully concealed beneath her simple dress, blades that had once earned her the name Swift Steel in the bloody back alleys of Hong Kong. Soon, she knew, the storm wouldn't be the only thing breaking over this rain-soaked port town. The only question was whether Port Haven's power brokers would learn why they called her Swift Steel before or after the blood started flowing. "Speaking of history," Reed continued, his voice carrying that dangerous edge Sarah remembered from wanted posters that had once adorned police stations across Hong Kong. "Governor Chen mentioned you only acquired this place a few months back, after the unfortunate accident that befell old Jack Morrison." Sarah kept her expression neutral, even as her mind raced. Governor Richard Chen, no relation despite the common surname, had been asking questions about her background. The governor, whose campaign promises to clean up the ports, had mysteriously transformed into policies that seemed to benefit certain business interests. The governor seems well informed about local business matters. "He takes an interest," Reed replied absently, running a finger along his jade ring. "Man in his position likes to know who's who in a growing port like Port Haven. Thing is, we did some asking around ourselves. Nobody seems to know much about Sarah Chen before she showed up here." "Not much to know," Sarah said, placing a glass of water in front of Reed without being asked, a subtle reminder that she'd been reading people long before he'd walked through her door, just looking for a quiet place to settle down. The crash of Murphy deliberately knocking over a chair echoed through the tavern, but Sarah didn't flinch. Her eyes tracked every movement, noting positions, angles, distances, information that had once meant the difference between life and death in a dozen Asian ports. If you're enjoying this tale of hidden dangers and deadly secrets, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's episode reveals a twist that changes everything. "Quiet's overrated," Reed said, his friendly facade slipping slightly. "Ports, changing, growing. Smart business owners know when to adapt, when to accept new partnership opportunities." Through the windows, Sarah caught glimpses of more Black Dragon men taking positions outside. Their movements carried the precise coordination she recognized from her past encounters with professional killers. These weren't common thugs playing at being businessmen. They were trained fighters preparing for potential violence. Maylin moved quietly through the tavern, refreshing drinks for the few remaining customers. Her movement seemed casual, but Sarah noted how she positioned herself to watch the back entrance while keeping clear lines of sight to Reed's men. They'd worked together long enough to read each other's subtle signals. "I prefer to keep things simple," Sarah replied steadily. "Just me, my tavern, and my regular customers." Reed's smile turned predatory. "Might want to reconsider that stance." He placed a business card on the bar, the Black Dragon Trading Company's logo prominently displayed along with a handwritten number. "Things happen in small ports. Fires, accidents, troublemakers causing problems. Good to have friends watching your back." "Is that what happened to the Lin family warehouse?" Maylin asked from the kitchen doorway, her voice carrying an edge Sarah had rarely heard from her friend. "Too many accidents," The Lin family warehouse had burned 3 weeks ago after its owners refused to sell. The official investigation concluded it was faulty wiring, despite the building having just passed inspection the previous month. 2 night watchmen had disappeared the same evening, their bodies later washing up in the harbor, showing signs of expert knife work. Reed's expression hardened. A tragic situation, should have had better insurance. Sarah picked up the business card, noting the elaborate letterhead and the governor's official seal watermarked in one corner. An interesting detail that suggested connections reaching higher than she'd initially suspected. "I'll keep it in mind." "You do that." Reed motioned to his men. "We'll be seeing you real soon, Miss Chen." Real soon indeed. After they left, Mai Lin locked the door and turned the sign to closed. They moved with the synchronization of people who had done this before, securing windows and checking shadows for any watchers left behind. Their daily performance of simple tavern workers had fooled another set of predators. But Sarah knew men like Reed didn't give up easily. "They're getting bolder," Mai Lin said in Cantonese, watching through the window as the Black Dragon men disappeared into the rain. "First the Lin warehouse, then Morrison's place, now they're here." Sarah studied Reed's business card, her mind connecting pieces of a larger puzzle. The Black Dragons were too organized, too methodical for simple intimidation. Their movement suggested professional training, their territory expansion too carefully planned. Each business they'd seized formed a pattern she'd seen before, one that spoke of something much bigger than a simple protection racket. "Send word to Detective Zhang," she told Mai Lin. "Tell him to watch the old cannery tonight. Something tells me our new friends aren't just running a protection racket." Mai Lin nodded, understanding the subtext. Michael Zhang was one of Sarah's old contacts, a Hong Kong detective now working privately in Port Haven. If the Black Dragons were up to something bigger, they'd need evidence that even the governor's influence couldn't bury. Sarah moved to the back office, pulling out a locked box she hadn't opened in months. Inside lay the tools of her former trade, a matched set of butterfly knives with custom jade handles, their steel unmarked despite the dozens of fights they'd seen. 3 years of quiet observation were about to end. As she checked her weapons with practiced efficiency, Sarah thought about Murphy's interest in the wall-mounted knives, Reed's trained movements, and Governor Chen's sudden curiosity about her. Background. The pieces were there, forming a picture she'd seen before in other ports, but this time she had the advantage. They thought they were dealing with a simple tavern owner, never suspecting that Sarah Swift Steel Chen had spent 8 years as the most feared blademaster in 3 countries. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The storm intensified over Port Haven as Sarah checked the tavern's back entrance one final time. Through rain-streaked windows, she caught glimpses of shadows moving through the darkness, Black Dragon sentries maintaining their watch. Reed's friendly visit had confirmed her suspicions. They weren't just pressuring local businesses, they were preparing for something bigger. Mai Lin emerged from the kitchen, carrying a pot of fresh tea. "Detective Zhang sent word," she whispered in Cantonese, setting the pot down with deliberate care. "Strange shipments arriving at the cannery, Black Dragon men guarding the docks, turning away even the harbour master's inspectors." Sarah poured 2 cups, letting the familiar ritual calm her racing thoughts. "How many guards?" "At least 12, all carrying weapons despite the port authorities' restrictions. Zhang says they're professionals, former military, maybe mercenaries. They maintain proper patrol patterns, coordinated shifts." Before Sarah could respond, heavy boots sounded on the tavern's front steps. Through the rain-blurred glass, she recognized Harbour Master Phillips, accompanied by 2 Black Dragon men she hadn't seen before. Their expensive suits matched Reed's, but they moved with a different kind of precision, the careful grace of trained knife fighters. If you're enjoying this tale of growing danger and hidden agendas, make sure you're subscribed. because tomorrow's episode reveals a truth that changes everything. "Stay in the kitchen," Sarah told Mylin quietly. "Watch the back door. If trouble starts." "I remember," Mylin replied, her hand brushing the small blade Sarah had given her months ago. "Like Singapore?" "Like Singapore." The harbour master entered first, his usually confident stride now hesitant. Rain dripped from his coat as he approached the bar, flanked by the two Black Dragon men. Sarah noted how they positioned themselves, one near the door, the other drifting toward the knife display, maintaining clear lines of attack while appearing casual. "Evening, Miss Chen," Philip said, his voice carrying forced cheerfulness. "Nasty weather we're having." "Indeed." Sarah continued wiping glasses, keeping her movements relaxed despite the tension humming through her body. "What brings the harbourmaster out on such a stormy night?" "Official business, actually." Phillips produced a document bearing the Port Authority's seal. "There's been some concern about proper licensing for establishments serving both alcohol and providing lodging. New regulations from the governor's office?" Sarah studied the document carefully, noting the official letterhead and Governor Chen's personal signature. But there, in the fine print, she spotted what she was looking for: a clause requiring additional security deposits for businesses operating near the waterfront. "These regulations seem quite specific," she observed mildly, almost as if they were written with particular establishments in mind. The Black Dragon man near the door shifted slightly, his hand straying toward his jacket. The movement caught the lamplight, and Sarah glimpsed a familiar tattoo on his wrist. 3 interlocked circles, the mark of the Ghostblade triad she'd encountered in Hong Kong. "The governor is very concerned about maintaining proper order in our growing port," Phillips continued, though his eyes wouldn't meet hers. "The security deposits are merely a precaution. Of course, certain business associations can help facilitate these requirements." "Like the Black Dragon Trading Company?" Sarah asked innocently, watching how both enforcers tensed at the direct reference. Phillips swallowed hard. "They're a legitimate organization with considerable influence. Mr. Reed speaks very highly of their ability to assist local businesses with regulatory compliance." Sarah's trained eye caught more details as the conversation continued. The way the Ghostblade enforcer near the knife display tested the floor's stability with subtle foot movements, marking solid positions for potential combat. How his partner maintained perfect positioning to cover the tavern's main entrance while staying just outside her theoretical reach. These weren't Reed's usual muscle. They were professional killers, probably brought in specifically for their blade work. The Black Dragons were escalating, bringing in specialists for what they expected to be close-quarters combat. "The security deposit is quite substantial," Phillips added, pointing to a figure that would bankrupt most small businesses. "Due within the week. However, I'm sure arrangements could be made with the right partners." "I'll need time to review these regulations," Sarah replied, noting how the Ghostblade men exchanged glances at her deliberate stalling. "Time is a luxury many businesses can't afford these days," Phillips said, his attempt at menace undermined by nervous perspiration. "Accidents happen so quickly in a busy port." The harbourmaster's words carried familiar weight. 3 businesses had burned in the past month, all after receiving similar visits. But the presence of Ghostblade enforcers suggested something new. The Black Dragons were expecting resistance, skilled resistance. "Is that what happened to the Lin warehouse?" Sarah asked quietly. "An accident?" Phillips flinched, but the Ghostblade near the door answered, his accent marking him. "As recently arrived from Hong Kong, smart business owners know when to adapt, others learn harder lessons." Sarah's fingers traced the bar's worn wood, measuring distances to her hidden weapons while maintaining her facade of simple tavern keeper. but something in her movement must have triggered the enforcer's trained instincts. Both men shifted slightly, their hands closer to their weapons. They'd been warned about her, she realized, not about Sarah Chen, the tavern owner, but about something else. Reed's questioning about her background hadn't just been routine intimidation. They suspected something, but weren't quite sure. It explained the ghost blade specialists, the careful positioning, the professional caution. "Consider your position." "Carefully, Miss Chen," Philip said, backing toward the door. "The port is changing. Best to be on the right side of that change." After they left, Sarah moved to secure the tavern, her mind racing through implications. The Black Dragons weren't just running protection rackets or pressuring businesses. Ghost blade enforcers, government connections, coordinated dock operations. It all suggested something much larger. Mei Lin emerged from the kitchen, her face tight with worry. "They're not just here for the tavern, are they?" "No," Sarah replied, watching rain hammer the empty street. "They're preparing for something bigger, and they're bringing in blade specialists because they know someone's watching, someone who knows how to use a knife." The storm's fury matched the tension building in Port Haven. Soon, Sarah knew, the Black Dragons would learn exactly why they called her Swift Steel. But first, she needed to discover what was happening at that cannery, and why it was worth bringing ghost blade killers halfway across the Pacific to protect. Detective Michael Zhang arrived at the Silver Mist's back door close to midnight, his long coat dripping from the relentless rain. Sarah recognized the tension in his movements immediately, the careful way he checked shadows before entering, how his hand stayed close to the weapon concealed beneath his coat. The former Hong Kong detective had learned caution the hard way during his years pursuing the triads. "You were right about the cannery," he said without preamble, accepting the cup of strong tea Mei Lin offered. "It's more than just smuggling, much more." Sarah secured the back door while Mei Lin kept watch at the front, their practiced routine automatic after months of cooperation. Through the windows, the storm's fury matched the tension building in Port Haven's dark streets. If you're enjoying this tale of dark conspiracies and hidden dangers, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's episode reveals a secret that will shake Port Haven to its foundations. "Tell me what you found," Sarah said quietly, noting how Zhang's hands trembled slightly as he sipped his tea. Not from fear, she knew, but from barely contained anger. "They're bringing in more than just contraband," Zhang replied in Cantonese, his voice barely above a whisper despite the storm's cover. "The shipments arrive at night, always during the harshest weather. Black Dragon men guard the docks, while Ghost Blade specialists oversee the unloading. But here's the thing. They're not just unloading cargo. They're bringing in people." Sarah's fingers tightened around her teacup. "Slaves. Workers, they call them. Promised passage to America and good jobs. Instead, they're locked in basement-holding cells until they're distributed to various enterprises up and down the coast. The governor's new construction projects, logging camps, railroad operations, anywhere that needs cheap disposable labor." Mei Lin's sharp intake of breath carried generations of cultural memory. Her own grandfather had come to America under similar false promises, though he'd eventually won his freedom through wit and determination. "The Ghost Blades are involved in human trafficking?" Sarah asked, her mind racing through implications. "That's not usually their style. They prefer more specialized operations." Zhang's expression darkened. "They're not just providing security, they're hunting someone who's been disrupting their operations in other ports, a knife fighter who's been causing serious problems for their organization. Sound familiar?" Sarah kept her expression neutral, though her pulse quickened. "How many disappearances so far?" 23 confirmed in the past month, mostly young men and women from poor families, people who won't be missed. The harbor patrol's been ordered to ignore certain ships, specific docks, everything sanctioned by official paperwork. with the governor's seal. Through the rain-streaked windows, Sarah caught glimpses of more shadows moving through the darkness. Black dragon sentries maintaining their watch, but now she noted subtle differences in their movements. Some carried themselves with the rigid precision of former military, while others moved with the fluid grace of trained blade artists. "They're building an empire," she said softly, pieces clicking into place. "Using the port authorities' corruption to bring in forced labor, then using those workers to enhance their legitimate businesses. The construction projects give them cover to move people and materials while building influence with local officials." Zhang nodded grimly. "The governor's involvement goes deeper than we thought. His new port development initiative, every major contract awarded to Black Dragon-affiliated companies. They're literally rebuilding Port Haven to suit their operations. And anyone who refuses to cooperate." Sarah's voice carried deadly quiet. "Accidents happen," Zhang replied, producing a carefully folded document from his coat. "Found this in the Harbour Master's office. List of businesses targeted for acquisition through purchase or unfortunate circumstance. The Silver Mist is on it." Sarah studied the list, noting familiar names. The Lynn Warehouse, Morrison's Place. Every business that controlled key locations or services the Black Dragons needed. They're not just taking over the port, she realized. They're erasing the old Port Haven completely, replacing it with their own version. "There's more," Zhang continued, his voice dropping even lower. "Remember those disappearances last month? The ones the police blamed on gang violence? Found evidence in the cannery. They weren't random killings. They were demonstrations, ghost blade specialists showing their skills to potential clients." Sarah's mind raced back to the murders that had plagued Port Haven's waterfront. Bodies found with precise wounds, killed with expert blade work. At the time, she'd recognized the technique, but couldn't prove anything. Now it made sense. The ghost blades weren't just providing muscle for the Black Dragons. They were advertising their services. "They're turning Port Haven into a base of operations," she said, watching rain hammer the cobblestone street outside. "A hub for their entire Pacific Northwest operation. The forced labor gives them a workforce. The construction projects provide cover, and the ghost blades ensure cooperation through fear." "Exactly," Zhang confirmed, "but there's something else. Something that scared my contact at the cannery, badly enough that he's planning to flee town tonight. The ghost blades aren't just here for security or demonstrations. They're preparing for something specific, something big." Mylin appeared from the front room, her face tight with worry. "More Black Dragon men arriving," she reported in rapid Cantonese. 4 carriages just pulled up at their headquarters. Important-looking people going inside despite the storm. Sarah moved to the window, careful to stay in the shadows. Through the rain, she caught glimpses of well-dressed figures hurrying into the Black Dragon's main office. Even at this distance, she recognized the distinctive way they carried themselves, the careful movements of people accustomed to wearing hidden weapons. "A gathering of killers," she said softly. "They're calling in specialists. But why? What's valuable enough to bring so many blade masters to one place?" Zhang's answer chilled her blood. "Tomorrow night, the governor's hosting a gala at his mansion. Every important business owner and official in Port Haven will attend. The perfect opportunity to eliminate any remaining opposition while establishing their complete control over the port." Sarah's hand unconsciously brushed one of her hidden knives. "How many ghost blade specialists so far?" "At least 8 confirmed, maybe more arriving tonight. All elite killers with international reputations. They're taking no chances, especially with rumors that Swift Steel might be operating in the area." Sarah allowed herself a small, cold smile. The ghost blades had good reason to fear Swift Steel's reputation. She'd cost them dearly during her years in Hong Kong, disrupting their operations and eliminating their best killers. Now they were bringing an army of blade masters to Port Haven, never suspecting that the legendary Swift Steel was already here, serving drinks behind a weathered bar. Detective Zhang departed into the storm-lashed night, leaving Sarah and Mai. Lin Tao processed the disturbing revelations about the Black Dragon's true operations. Through the tavern's windows, Port Haven's gas lamps cast weak halos in the darkness, their light barely penetrating the heavy rain that transformed the streets. Into shadowy canyons. They'll make their move at the governor's gala, Sarah said softly, more to herself than Mai Lin. A perfect opportunity to eliminate any remaining opposition while establishing complete control over the port. Mai Lin moved closer, her voice dropping to match Sarah's quiet tone. You recognize some of them, don't you? The Ghost Blade specialists? Sarah's mind flashed back to darker days, to rain-slicked alleys in Hong Kong where blade masters tested their skills in lethal combat. A few, the one with the wrist tattoo, 3 interlocked circles, that's Marcus Wong. They call him the Shadow Serpent. 8 confirmed kills with a blade, all other master knife fighters. The tall one who came with Phillips, Jack Silent Cooper, former British military, turned mercenary, specializes in making deaths look like accidents. And if you're enjoying this tale of deadly skills and dangerous pasts, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's episode reveals a connection that changes everything. A sudden movement outside caught Sarah's attention. Through the rain, she glimpsed a figure hurrying down the street, collar turned up against the storm. Even at this distance, she recognized Zhang's contact from the cannery, Henry Liu, a clerk who'd been helping the detective gather evidence about the Black Dragon's operation. Something's wrong, Sarah said, noting the panic in Liu's movements. He's supposed to be leaving town tonight, not heading toward the cannery. Before she could say more, shadows detached themselves from doorways along the street. Ghost Blade, operatives moving with deadly purpose, herding Liu toward the waterfront. The clerk's terror was evident even through the rain as he realized his escape route was cut off. They knew, Mai Lin whispered. Somehow they knew he was helping Zhang. Sarah was already moving, retrieving her matched butterfly knives from their hidden compartment. The jade handles felt familiar in her grasp, awakening muscle memories from countless fights. Watch the tavern. If I'm not back in 20 minutes. Like Macau? Mai Lin asked, referring to another rain-soaked night when Sarah had faced impossible odds. Like Macau. Sarah slipped out the back door, using the storm's fury as cover as she moved through Port Haven's maze of alleyways. Years of experience guided her steps, helping her parallel Liu's path while avoiding the Ghost Blade operatives herding him toward what would certainly be a gruesome fate. The rain hammered against her face as she scaled a fire escape, gaining the advantage of height. Below, she counted 6 Ghost Blade specialists coordinating their movements with professional precision. They were pushing Liu toward Warehouse 12, a Black Dragon-controlled building, perfect for making someone disappear. Through the rainfall, Sarah caught fragments of conversation as 2 Ghost Blade operatives passed beneath her position. "Boss wants him questioned properly," one said. In Cantonese, find out everything he told the detective. "What about Swift Steel?" the other asked. "If she's really in Port Haven." "That's why we're all here. Tomorrow night's operation needs to go perfectly. No loose ends, no witnesses, and if Swift Steel shows up..." He patted the knife at his belt meaningfully. Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. The Ghost Blades had brought in their elite killers, specifically because they feared Swift Steel's interference. Yet here she was, crouched in the rain above them, about to remind them why that fear was justified. Liu reached the warehouse door, pounding desperately as Ghost Blade operatives closed in from all sides. Sarah noted their positions, analyzing. angles and distances with the clarity that had made her legendary in Hong Kong's underworld. 6 highly trained killers against 1 knife fighter. They probably thought the odds were in their favor. They were wrong. Sarah's first throw caught the nearest Ghostblade operative in the shoulder, her knife striking with surgical precision to disable without killing. Before his cry of pain could alert the others, she was already moving, dropping from the fire, escape into their midst like an avenging spirit. Her matched butterfly knives seemed to dance in the rain as she engaged 2 more operatives simultaneously. Their technique was excellent, fluid combinations learned in secret dojos and refined through lethal experience. But Sarah hadn't earned the name Swift Steel through training alone. Every movement was precisely calculated, each strike designed to incapacitate rather than kill. A third operative charged, wielding a curved blade with expert grace. Sarah recognized him as one of Marcus Wong's personal students, his technique marking him as highly trained in the ghost blade style. She redirected his attack with 1 knife while her other blade found the nerve cluster in his arm, sending his weapon clattering to the rain-slicked cobblestones. 2 more Ghostblade specialists moved to flank her, their coordinated attacks demonstrating years of partnered training. Sarah dropped and rolled, letting their blades pass overhead while her own knives found vulnerable tendons and pressure points. They collapsed, their bodies refusing to obey commands as Sarah's precise strikes took effect. The final operative. She recognized him as Jack Cooper, proved why he'd earned his reputation. His blade work was exceptional, each movement flowing into the next with deadly efficiency. They exchanged a flurry of strikes that would have seemed impossible to untrained eyes, their knives leaving traces of silver in the rain-laden air. "Swift Steel," Cooper said, recognition dawning in his eyes as he registered her distinctive style. "They said you'd retired." "Seems reports of my retirement were exaggerated," Sarah replied, before ending the fight with a combination she'd perfected in Hong Kong's back alleys. Cooper joined his companions on the wet ground, disabled, but alive to carry word of Swift Steel's return to their masters. Lou stared at her with wide eyes as she approached, clearly struggling to reconcile the quiet tavern keeper with the legendary knife fighter who'd just disabled 6 Ghostblade masters in under a minute. "Detective Zhang sent me," she said quietly, helping him to his feet. "We need to get you somewhere safe. Tomorrow night's too important to risk losing your testimony." As she led Liu away from the warehouse, Sarah's mind was already racing through implications. The Ghostblades now knew for certain that Swift Steel was in Port Haven. They'd accelerate their plans, bring in more specialists, take no chances with tomorrow night's operation. But that was exactly what she'd wanted. Sometimes the best way to disrupt a criminal empire wasn't from the shadows. It was to let them know exactly what they were facing, to make them rush their plans in desperate response to a legend they'd thought safely retired. The storm continued to rage over Port Haven as Sarah guided Liu through back alleys toward safety. Tomorrow night's gala would determine the port's future, and now the Ghostblades would face that crucial operation, knowing that Swift Steel was waiting for them. The only question was whether they'd learn why they called her Swift Steel before or after their carefully laid plans fell apart. Sarah guided Liu through Port Haven's rain-slicked alleys with practiced efficiency, taking indirect routes to avoid Black Dragon patrols. The clerk's testimony about the cannery operation could shatter the criminal empire's careful facade, but only if he survived until tomorrow night. Behind them, she could hear Ghostblade operatives regaining consciousness, their curses carried on the storm winds. They reached the Silver Mist's hidden cellar entrance, a remnant from Prohibition days that old Morrison had shown her before his accident. Mai Lin was waiting, helping them inside before securing the heavy door against the night. "The Ghostblades are mobilizing," Mai Lin reported in rapid Cantonese as they descended the narrow stairs. "Black Dragon men everywhere, searching every shadow. They know Swift Steel has returned." If you're enjoying this tale of past debts and future reckonings, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's episode reveals a secret that changes everything. Sarah led them to a hidden room behind the wine racks, a secure space she'd prepared for exactly this kind of situation. Liu collapsed onto a chair, his hand shaking as the night's events caught up with him. "You're really her," he whispered. "Swift Steel, the one they whisper about in the ports, the blade master who brought down the Red Circle Syndicate in Singapore." "That was another life," Sarah replied, checking his condition with practiced eyes. "No serious injuries, though. The fear had left its mark, one I'd hoped to leave behind." Mei-Lin brought tea, the familiar ritual helping calm Liu's nerves. "Why did you stop?" he asked. "The stories about you. They say you never lost a fight, never failed to protect the innocent." Sarah's hand unconsciously touched the jade, pendant hidden beneath her collar, a gift from her mentor, Master Chen, before his murder at Ghostblade hands. Sometimes winning isn't enough. Sometimes the cost of victory is too high. Her mind drifted back to that rain-soaked night in Hong Kong 3 years ago. She'd been tracking a Ghostblade operation similar to this one, human trafficking disguised as legitimate business. But she'd moved too quickly, too confident in her abilities. The Ghostblades had been ready, turning her intervention into a trap. "They took hostages," she said softly, the memories sharp despite the years. "Innocent people, threatened to kill them unless I stood down. I did what they asked, dropped my weapons, but the Ghostblades..." Her fingers tightened around her teacup. "They killed them anyway, made me watch, said it was a lesson about the price of interference." Liu's eyes widened with understanding. "That's why you disappeared, why Swift Steel vanished from the ports. I spent a year hunting down everyone responsible for those deaths," Sarah continued, her voice carrying deadly quiet. "Made sure they understood exactly why they called me Swift Steel. But afterward, I couldn't continue. Not the same way. Every fight, every confrontation carried the weight of those lost lives." Mei-Lin touched her arm gently. "But you didn't really stop, did you? You just changed methods, became more careful, more strategic." Sarah nodded slowly. "Master Chen always said the blade was just a tool. True strength came from knowing when to strike and when to wait. So I waited, watched, gathered information, built networks of allies like Detective Zhang, learned to fight smarter, not just faster. Through the cellar's thick walls, they could hear the storm's fury matching the tension in Port Haven's streets. Black dragon men would be spreading through the port town now, their search growing more desperate as word of Swift Steel's return reached their masters. "The Ghostblades think they learned my weakness that night in Hong Kong," Sarah said, checking her knives with practiced care. "They believe threatening innocence will make me hesitate, make me vulnerable. But they taught me something else entirely, the importance of striking at the right moment when all the pieces are in place." Liu leaned forward, understanding dawning in his eyes. "The governor's gala. Everyone who matters in Port Haven will be there. The perfect opportunity for them to eliminate opposition. Or the perfect chance to expose their entire operation," Sarah finished. "Every corrupt official, every Ghostblade killer, every Black Dragon leader gathered in one place, with the right evidence, the right witnesses." "They'll be ready for you," Mei-Lin warned. "After tonight, they'll bring in every blade master they can find. The gala will be heavily guarded." Sarah allowed herself a small, cold smile. "They'll be watching for Swift Steel, the legendary knife fighter who works alone. They won't expect her to have allies, to have spent months building a network throughout Port Haven. They think tonight's display of skill was meant to intimidate them. Instead, it was to make them paranoid," Liu realized, "to force them to concentrate their forces, gather their leadership close." Exactly. Sometimes the best way to fight an empire isn't through direct confrontation. Sometimes you have to let them Think they're the ones in control, right up until the moment their own paranoia becomes their weakness. A knock at the cellar door interrupted their conversation. 3 quick taps followed by 2 slower ones. Mai Lin hurried up the stairs, returning moments later with Detective Zhang. The former Hong Kong policeman was soaked from the storm, but his eyes carried fierce determination. "Word spreading through the underworld," he reported without preamble. "The Ghost Blades are calling in every favor, every killer they can reach. They're offering triple their usual rates for anyone who can get to Port Haven by tomorrow night." Sarah nodded, pieces falling into place. "They'll be focused on blade masters, expecting another direct confrontation. How many honest police officers can you gather? Men who can't be bought." "Enough," Zhang replied, understanding her plan. "Especially with federal agents due to arrive tomorrow morning. I have friends in Seattle who've been building a case against the Black Dragons for months. They just needed concrete evidence." "Evidence we can provide," Liu added, patting his coat pocket where Sarah knew he carried documents detailing the cannery operation. "Proof of their human trafficking, their connections to corrupt officials." "Tomorrow night changes everything," Sarah said softly, watching rainwater trickle down the cellar walls. "One way or another, Port Haven's future will be decided. At the governor's gala, the Ghost Blades think they're preparing to eliminate their opposition. Instead, they're walking into a trap," Mai Lin finished. "One you've been laying since the day you arrived." Sarah's hand brushed the jade pendant again, remembering Master Chen's final lesson about patience and precision. The Ghost Blades had taught her the cost of rushing into conflict unprepared. Tomorrow night, they would learn what swift steel had become in the years since Hong Kong, not just a legendary knife fighter, but someone who understood that true victory required more than just skill with a blade. It required strategy, patience, and the wisdom to know exactly when to strike. Dawn approached Port Haven with uncharacteristic clarity, the storm finally exhausting itself over the Pacific. Sarah stood at the Silver Mist's upper window, watching. The first hints of sunlight touched the harbor's waters. The night's events had transformed the port town's atmosphere. Black Dragon men maintained obvious patrols, while Ghost Blade specialists moved more subtly through the shadows, their presence marking a fundamental shift in the balance of power. Detective Zhang spread detailed blueprints of the governor's mansion across a hidden table in the tavern's back room. The plans had cost him considerable favors to acquire, but they represented a crucial advantage for tomorrow night's operation. Sarah studied the layouts carefully, her trained eye noting defensive positions and potential approaches. If you're enjoying this tale of strategy and survival, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's episode reveals a plan that changes everything. "The main ballroom here?" Zhang indicated, pointing to a large central chamber. "The governor's. Planning a formal dinner followed by speeches and signing ceremonies. Every important official and business owner in Port Haven will attend, along with representatives from Seattle and San Francisco." "Perfect cover for eliminating opposition," Sarah observed, noting how the room's configuration created natural choke points. Once the doors close, anyone inside would be at their mercy. Mai Lin emerged from her watchpost at the front window. More carriages arriving at Black Dragon headquarters. Marcus Wong himself just went inside. They're gathering their elite killers. Sarah's fingers traced routes through the mansion's corridors, measuring distances and angles. How many Ghost Blade specialists confirmed so far? "At least 15, Zhang reported grimly, all master-level blade fighters. They're positioning them throughout the mansion, disguised as servers and security. The governor's own men will be replaced hours before the event. And our resources." The detective allowed himself a small smile. 8 federal agents arriving on this morning's steamer. 12 honest police officers I trust completely, all experienced with undercover work. They'll coordinate with my contacts in the harbor patrol to secure the waterfront, cut off any escape routes. Sarah nodded, her mind assembling pieces of the complex operation. The Ghost Blades will expect swift steel to attack directly, try to disrupt the ceremony. They'll concentrate their best fighters near the governor and other officials, while leaving other areas relatively unguarded, Liu added from his position near the cellar stairs. The clerk's knowledge of Black Dragon operations had proved invaluable in understanding their methods. They always prioritize protecting their leadership. A weakness we can exploit, Sarah agreed. But first we need to understand exactly how they'll structure their defense. Mai Lin? The cook produced a carefully folded paper from her apron. The staff list for tomorrow's gala, acquired through her connections in the Chinese community. 20 servants assigned to the main ballroom, another 15 for the dining room. All Ghost Blade operatives brought in specifically for this operation. They'll coordinate through a series of subtle signals, hand gestures that look natural to untrained observers. Sarah's trained eye caught details others might miss. The precise positioning of serving stations, the careful arrangement of tables that would provide defensive coverage while appearing completely normal. The Ghost Blades had planned this, meticulously, transforming the governor's celebration into an elaborate trap. "They're expecting me to try something dramatic," she said softly, memories of past confrontations guiding her analysis. A direct challenge, like in Singapore, or an ambush like in Macau. They'll have countermeasures prepared for every traditional approach. "Which is why we do something unprecedented," Zhang suggested, understanding her direction. "No lone knife. Fighter taking on an army. No dramatic showdown between blade masters." "Exactly. The Ghost Blades think they're dealing with swift steel as they knew her, the legendary knife fighter who works alone. They're not prepared for swift steel with allies, with a network, with months of careful preparation." Sarah moved to another blueprint, this one showing the mansion's lower levels. Liu's testimony about the cannery operation provides legal justification for federal intervention. Once the evidence is presented, the agents can move openly. But timing will be crucial. If we move too soon, the Ghost Blades will simply delay their plan. Too late. "And the killing starts," Mai Lin finished grimly. "They'll eliminate everyone who might oppose them, blame it on radical agitators. The governor's death would let them impose martial law, give them complete control of the port." "So we let them think their plan is working," Sarah continued, her strategy taking clear shape. "Let them gather their leadership, concentrate their forces. The very things that make the ballroom a perfect trap for their victims also make it a perfect trap for the trappers." Zhang studied the blueprints thoughtfully. "The federal agents can coordinate with my police officers, secure the perimeter while maintaining a low profile. But getting inside, past their security, will require a different approach entirely," Sarah agreed. "One that plays to their expectations while subverting them completely. The Ghost Blades are masters of deception, of using appearances to hide deadly reality. Tomorrow night, we use that same principle against them." She moved to the window, watching more carriages arrive at Black Dragon headquarters. Each one likely carried another legendary blade master, another killer drawn by the promise of wealth and the challenge of facing swift steel. They thought they were gathering for a glorious triumph, never suspecting they were actually assembling for their own downfall. "Mai Lin, I'll need you to coordinate with the kitchen staff. Many of them have lost family to Black Dragon operations. They'll help if they know justice is coming. Liu, your testimony needs to be properly documented before the federal agents arrive." "Zhang." The detective nodded grimly. "I'll make sure my men understand their roles. No hesitation when the moment comes." Sarah's hand brushed the jade pendant beneath her collar, remembering Master Chen's teachings about patience and precision. The Ghost Blades thought tomorrow night's operation would establish their complete control over Port Haven. Instead, it would become a lesson about the true nature of Swift Steel's legend. Not just her skill with a blade, but her ability to turn an enemy's strength into their greatest weakness. "The blade is just a tool," she quoted softly, Master Chen's wisdom taking on new meaning. "True victory comes from knowing exactly when and where to strike." The morning sun cast long shadows across Port Haven as Sarah watched another steamer dock at the harbour. Even from the Silver Mist's upper window, she could identify the federal agents disembarking, their careful movements and alert observation marking them as law enforcement, despite their civilian attire. Zhang had chosen his allies well. A knock at the tavern's back door interrupted her surveillance. The distinctive pattern identified Mai Lin, returning from her morning reconnaissance. The cook's face carried tension as she entered, her usual calm demeanor disturbed by what she'd witnessed. "Marcus Wong is gathering his elite Ghost Blade specialists at the mansion," she reported in rapid Cantonese. "They're conducting final preparations, coordinating signals and positions, but there's something else, something worse. If you're enjoying this tale of mounting tension and deadly preparations, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's episode reveals a threat that changes everything." "Tell me," Sarah said quietly, noting how Mai Lin's hands trembled slightly as she poured tea, not from fear, but from barely contained anger. "They're bringing in insurance, hostages, families of business owners who've resisted Black Dragon. Control. They'll be kept in the mansion's lower levels during the gala, insurance against any interference." Sarah's jaw tightened as memories of Hong Kong surfaced. The Ghostblades were using the same tactics that had forced her into retirement 3 years ago, threatening innocents to control their opponents. But this time, she'd anticipated their methods. How many families? At least 6 so far. The Lins, the Morrisons, even Harbour Master Philip's wife and daughter. They're telling everyone it's special invitation to the governor's celebration, but armed men are watching their homes to ensure cooperation. Through the window, Sarah caught glimpses of more Ghostblade specialists arriving at the mansion. Each one brought their own fighting style, their own deadly reputation. Any other time, facing so many Master Blade fighters would be suicide. But tonight, their very gathering would become their weakness. "Zhang needs to know about the hostages," Sarah said, her mind already adapting plans to account for this development. "It changes how his men will need to position themselves." "Already sent word," Mai Lin confirmed, "but there's more. Reed visited the cannery this morning, met with the Ghostblade leadership. They're not just planning to eliminate opposition at the gala. They're preparing to make examples, to demonstrate what happens to anyone who resists their control." Sarah moved to the hidden room where their planning materials were stored. The mansion blueprints seemed to take on new significance as she studied possible approaches to the lower levels where hostages would be held. "They think they're being clever," she said softly, "using the same strategy that worked in Hong Kong. They believe threatening innocence will force me to hesitate, make me vulnerable. Instead, they're proving why they need to be stopped," Mai Lin finished. "But Sarah, even with Zhang's police and the federal agents, we're talking about facing over 20 Master Blade fighters while protecting hostages. The risk is necessary," Sarah replied, her voice carrying quiet conviction. "In Hong Kong, I was alone, unprepared for their tactics. This time, we have resources, allies, and most importantly, knowledge of their methods. The Ghostblades think they're recreating their past victory. Instead, they're walking into a trap 3 months in the making." The tavern's front door opened, admitting Detective Zhang and one of the newly arrived federal agents. Agent Thomas Carter carried himself with the confidence of an experienced investigator, his keen eyes taking in details of the tavern's layout even as he approached. "The hostage situation complicates things," he said without preamble. having clearly received Zhang's update. But it also gives us additional legal justification for immediate intervention. Kidnapping across state lines falls under federal jurisdiction. Sarah studied the agent carefully, noting the subtle signs that marked him as more than a simple investigator. The way he moved suggested martial arts training, while the slight bulge under his jacket indicated a shoulder holster. "Your men are prepared for close-quarters combat?" she asked. "The ghost blades won't surrender easily." Carter's smile held grim understanding. "We've dealt with their kind before. My team includes specialists in close protection and hostage extraction. Once the signal is given, we can secure the lower levels while your group handles the main ballroom. They'll have their best fighters concentrated upstairs," Zhang added, spreading updated security plans across the table. Marcus Wong, Jack Cooper, and at least 10 other Master Blade artists, all focused on protecting the governor and Black Dragon leadership during the ceremony. While leaving the hostages under lighter guard, Sarah noted, they don't expect anyone to know about the families being held below. Another miscalculation we can exploit. Through the window, more carriages arrived at the mansion. Sarah recognized the governor's distinctive vehicle, followed by several carrying Black Dragon officials. The pieces were falling into place. Powers both legitimate and criminal gathering for what they thought would be their moment of triumph. "Tonight changes everything," she said softly, watching Port Haven's future taking shape before her eyes. "The Ghost Blades think they're preparing to eliminate all opposition, to cement their control through fear and violence. Instead, they're gathering their entire operation in one place," Carter finished. "Leadership, enforcers, corrupt officials, all the evidence we need to dismantle their organization completely." Sarah's hand brushed the jade pendant beneath her collar, revealing the weight of Master Chen's final teachings. The Ghost Blades had taught her the cost of rushing into conflict unprepared. Tonight, they would learn what Swift Steel had become in the years since Hong Kong. Not just a legendary knife fighter, but someone who understood that true victory required more than just skill with a blade. It required patience, precision, and the wisdom to know exactly when to strike. Evening shadows lengthened across Port Haven as Sarah made final preparations in the Silver Mist's hidden back room. Her formal evening gown, carefully selected for this night, concealed specialized holsters designed to accommodate her matched butterfly knives. Every movement had to appear natural, even graceful, while allowing instant access to her weapons. When the moment came, Mai Lin helped with final adjustments, her experienced hands ensuring everything lay perfectly. "The Ghost Blades have replaced all the mansion's regular servants," she reported in hushed Cantonese. 23 Blade Masters confirmed, positioned throughout the building. Marcus Wong personally oversaw the security arrangements. If you're enjoying this tale of gathering storms and hidden weapons, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's episode reveals a betrayal that changes everything. Through the tavern's windows, Sarah watched Black Dragon carriages moving through Port Haven's darkening streets. Each one carried officials or business owners heading to the governor's gala, many accompanied by Ghost Blade escorts ensuring their cooperation. The atmosphere carried a palpable tension, as if the entire port town held its breath before an approaching storm. Detective Zhang arrived through the back entrance, his formal attire marking him as another guest heading to the celebration. "Final confirmation from Agent Carter," he said without preamble. "Federal teams are in position around the mansion. They've identified 4 separate locations where hostages are being held." Sarah nodded, her mind cataloging details while maintaining focus on the larger strategy. "And the harbor patrol. Under our control, any vessels attempting to leave Port Haven will be intercepted. The Black Dragons won't be able to escape by water once things start." A knock at the front door interrupted their conversation. 3 quick taps followed by 2 slower ones, the signal from their network of allies. Mai Lin admitted Liu, the clerk's face tight with tension as he reported the latest developments. "They're searching everyone entering the mansion," he said, accepting a steadying cup of tea. "Ghostblade specialists checking for weapons while appearing to be simple doormen, but there's something else, something worse." Sarah caught the fear in his voice. "Tell me." "They've brought in Yi Chen." The name sent a chill through the room. Yi Chen, no relation to Sarah, but infamous throughout Asia for his lethal blade work, the man who'd earned the title Death's Shadow through over 30 confirmed kills, each executed with terrifying precision. "Impossible," Mai Lin whispered. "Yi Chen never leaves Hong Kong. He's too valuable to the triads there." The Black Dragons must have offered him something significant, Sarah said quietly, her mind racing through implications. His presence changes things. Yi Chen isn't just a blade master. He's an expert at identifying other knife fighters, at seeing through disguises and covers. Zhang's face showed grim understanding. He'll be watching everyone entering the mansion, looking for signs of trained movement or concealed weapons. If he recognizes you, the entire operation could be compromised before it begins, Sarah finished. Yi Chen knew Swift Steel's reputation in Hong Kong, studied recordings of my fighting style. He may be the one person who can identify me simply by how I move. Through the windows, more carriages approached the governor's mansion. The celebration would begin soon, gathering Port Haven's power brokers and their ghost blade guards into what they thought would be a perfect trap. Instead, it had become even more dangerous than they'd anticipated. "We need to adjust the plan," Zhang suggested, but Sarah was already shaking her head. "No time. Yi Chen's presence is unexpected, but it doesn't change the fundamental strategy. In fact," a cold smile touched her lips, "it might work to our advantage." The others looked at her with confusion, but Sarah's mind was already racing ahead, seeing new possibilities in this complication. Yi Chen's reputation is built on his ability to identify threats, to spot concealed fighters before they can strike. The Ghost Blades will rely on his judgment, trust his assessments completely. Understanding dawned in Mai Lin's eyes. They'll focus their security wherever he directs them. Exactly. Yi Chen will be looking for Swift Steel as he knew her in Hong Kong, a solitary knife fighter preparing for direct confrontation. He'll never expect. Sarah paused, ensuring their privacy, before continuing. He'll never expect Swift Steel to attend the governor's gala as an invited guest, openly wearing an evening gown while coordinating with federal agents and local police. "It's still incredibly dangerous," Zhang warned. "If Yi Chen does recognize you, then we adapt," Sarah replied firmly. "Tonight isn't about one knife fighter against an army. It's about justice finally reaching Port Haven, about ending the Ghost Blade's reign of terror once and for all. Yi Chen may be a legendary killer, but even he can't fight an entire federal task force while protecting corrupt officials and watching for Swift Steel." She moved to the window, watching as the sun's final rays painted Port Haven's waters in shades of gold and crimson. Soon, she would join the stream of carriages heading to the governor's mansion, walking directly into the site of one of the world's deadliest blade masters. The Ghost Blades thought Yi Chen's presence would ensure their security, would let them identify any threats before they could materialize. Instead, Sarah reflected, adjusting her concealed weapons one final time, his focus on looking for Swift Steel would blind him to the larger operation moving into position around the mansion. Sometimes the most effective strategy wasn't hiding in shadows, but hiding in plain sight, letting your enemy's expectations become their greatest weakness. Detective Zhang's borrowed carriage approached the governor's mansion beneath a sky painted with the last colors of sunset. Sarah sat perfectly composed, despite the tension humming through her body. Years of training, helping her maintain the appearance of a simple tavern owner attending a formal celebration. Through the carriage windows, she noted ghost blade operatives, positioned at strategic points along the approaching drive, their formal attire failing to completely disguise their predatory alertness. "Security's even tighter than we anticipated," Zhang murmured, playing his role as escort while cataloguing defensive positions. At least 30 blade masters scattered through the grounds. Yi Chen must have recommended additional precautions. If you're enjoying this tale of mounting tension and deadly deception, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's episode reveals a moment that changes everything. The carriage stopped at the mansion's main entrance, where elegantly dressed guests ascended marble steps between rows of watchful servants. Sarah's trained eye identified at least 6 master knife fighters among the doormen alone. They're practiced, movements visible to anyone who knew what to look for. And there, at the top of the steps, stood Yi Chen himself. The legendary killer's presence was impossible to miss, though he affected the manner of a simple majordomo greeting guests. His perfectly tailored formal wear couldn't disguise the deadly grace of his movements, the way his eyes constantly scanned for threats while appearing to merely welcome arrivals. Even standing still, he radiated lethal capability. "Ready?" Zhang asked quietly as their carriage door opened. Sarah allowed herself a small, cold smile. "We're about to find out." Zhang descended first, offering his hand with perfect, gentlemanly courtesy as Sarah emerged. Her evening gown, a deep green silk creation that complemented her jade pendant, had been carefully designed for this moment. Every fold and drape concealed specialized holsters while appearing completely natural. The fabric whispered across hidden weapons as she moved, each step measured and graceful despite the deadly arsenal she carried. They joined the line of guests ascending the steps, Sarah maintaining the slightly uncertain manner of someone unused to such grand occasions. Around them, ghost blade operatives disguised as footmen and servants watched everyone with predatory intensity, paying special attention to any who moved with too much confidence or precision. As they approached the entrance, Sarah felt Yi Chen's gaze fall upon her. The legendary killer's eyes carried decades of experience, identifying threats, seeing through disguises, spotting the subtle tells that marked trained fighters. She kept her movements deliberately imperfect, allowing small signs of nervousness to show while maintaining her core deception. "Detective Zhang," Yi Chen greeted them, his accent marking him as recently arrived from Hong Kong. "And this must be Miss Chen, the tavern owner we've heard so much about." His smile never reached his eyes as they studied her with cold intensity. "An honor to attend," Sarah replied, pitching her voice slightly higher than normal, letting it carry a touch of anxiety. "I've never been to such a grand affair." Yi Chen's hand moved with practiced grace as he gestured them forward, but Sarah recognized the motion for what it really was, a test designed to provoke an instinctive reaction from any trained fighter. She maintained her slightly awkward social manner, allowing herself to startle slightly at his sudden movement while suppressing her true fighting instincts. "Please proceed inside," he said smoothly, "though I must ask all guests to submit to a brief security check. Mere formality, you understand. These are dangerous times." 2 Ghostblade operatives stepped forward, their manner professional as they began checking guests for weapons. Sarah noted how Yi Chen watched this process, paying more attention to how people moved during the search than to what the searchers actually found. He was looking for the subtle tells that would identify trained fighters, the unconscious adjustments that marked someone accustomed to combat. The search was thorough, but not invasive. the ghost blades maintaining their cover as proper security. Staff, Sarah's concealed weapons, specially designed for exactly this situation, remained undetected. More importantly, she kept her movements natural, slightly uncertain, allowing none of her true capabilities to show. Yet, as they moved past, each into the mansion's grand entrance hall, Sarah felt his gaze lingering on her, not with recognition, but with something else, a predator's instinct that sensed something wasn't quite what it seemed. She could almost see his legendary mind working, analyzing every detail of their brief interaction. Inside, the mansion had been transformed into a showcase of power and wealth. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over marble floors, while elegantly dressed guests mingled beneath, watched by ever-present servants. Sarah noted how the ghost blade operatives had positioned themselves throughout the space, maintaining clear lines of sight while appearing to simply serve drinks or attend to guests' needs. "He suspects something," Zhang murmured as they moved deeper into the gathering. "Not specifically you, but he knows there's more happening than appears on the surface," Sarah agreed quietly. Yi Chen didn't earn his reputation by ignoring instincts, but suspicion isn't the same as certainty, and by now... She glanced at the ornate clock mounted above the entrance hall. Agent Carter's teams would be moving into their final positions around the mansion. Detective Zhang's trusted officers would be spreading through the gathering, identifying Ghostblade operatives while maintaining their own cover. Everything was proceeding according to plan, even if that plan now carried additional complications. Through the crowd, Sarah caught glimpses of the hostages, prominent families seated at special tables near the main stage, their forced smiles failing to completely hide their fear. Ghostblade specialists maintained careful watch over these honored guests, ensuring their cooperation through unspoken threat. "It begins soon," she said softly, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing server while maintaining her role as a simple tavern owner out of her depth in high society. Once the governor starts the ceremony, everything changes, Zhang finished, his hand brushing the hidden signal device that would coordinate their allies' movements. "Let's hope Yi Chen's instincts don't work too quickly." Sarah allowed herself another small, cold smile. The legendary killer's instincts were legendary for a reason, but tonight, those very instincts would become part of his weakness. Sometimes the most effective deception wasn't hiding your presence, but hiding your true purpose in plain sight. The governor's mansion ballroom glittered with calculated opulence as Sarah moved carefully through the gathering crowd. Crystal chandeliers cast strategic pools of light, while leaving deeper shadows in the corners where Ghostblade operatives maintained their watch. She noted how the room's arrangement created natural choke points, turning what appeared to be an elegant celebration into a carefully designed trap. Reed appeared through the crowd, his expensive evening wear failing to completely disguise the predatory grace of his movements. The Black Dragon Enforcer's jade ring caught the light as he approached, its notches marking past kills now clearly visible. "Miss Chen," he drawled, offering a glass of champagne with practiced courtesy. "So, pleased you could join us. Though I must admit, I'm surprised you accepted the invitation given our recent discussions about business arrangements." If you're enjoying this tale of deadly pleasantries and hidden tensions, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's episode reveals a truth that shatters everything. Sarah accepted the glass while maintaining her facade of slight social discomfort. "One doesn't refuse an invitation from the governor, Mr. Reed. Even a simple tavern keeper understands that much." His smile never reached his eyes as he studied her with careful intensity. "Indeed. Though speaking of the governor, he was quite interested in some recent information about disturbances near the waterfront, particularly regarding certain incidents involving Ghostblade operatives." Through the crowd, Sarah caught glimpses of Marcus Wong coordinating with other blade masters, their practiced movements marking them as elite killers despite their servants' attire. She also noted Agent Carter's team moving into position, maintaining their cover while preparing for the signal to act. "I'm afraid I don't follow the waterfront's politics very closely," Sarah replied, letting a touch of anxiety enter her voice. "My concerns focus mainly on keeping the Silver Mist running smoothly." Admirable focus," Reed said smoothly, "though I couldn't help but notice certain similarities between recent events and stories from Hong Kong. Tales about a legendary knife fighter who specialized in disrupting criminal operations, someone they called Swift Steel." Sarah allowed herself to appear confused while her trained senses tracked movements throughout the ballroom. "I'm not familiar with Hong Kong's legends, Mr. Reed. My world is considerably smaller." "Is it?" His voice carried dangerous inquiry. "Yi Chen seemed quite interested in your arrival. He has a remarkable talent for recognizing potential threats." Before Sarah could respond, a subtle shift in the room's atmosphere caught her attention. The Ghostblade operatives were adjusting their positions, moving with practiced coordination as Governor Chen approached the main stage. The moment they'd been waiting for was approaching. "If you'll excuse me," Reed said with cold courtesy, "I believe the ceremony is about to begin. Do enjoy the celebration, Miss Chen, while you can." As he moved away, Sarah caught Zhang's signal from across the room. The detective had positioned himself near one of the emergency exits, ready to coordinate with his officers when the moment came. Through the crowd, she glimpsed Mai Lin among the kitchen staff, the cook's presence ensuring their allies below stairs were prepared. The governor mounted the stage with practiced political grace, his expensive suit and confident manner projecting authority. Behind him, Sarah noted how Yi Chen had positioned himself to watch the entire room, his legendary instincts focused on identifying any potential threats. "Distinguished guests," Governor Chen began, his voice carrying clearly through the ballroom, "we gather tonight to celebrate Port Haven's bright future. Through strategic partnerships and careful development, our humble port is transforming into a centerpiece of Pacific commerce." Sarah's trained eye caught more subtle movements as Ghostblade specialists adjusted their positions. They were preparing for something, their coordinated actions suggesting the ceremony was more than just speeches and formal agreements. Through the crowd, she glimpsed the hostage families seated at their special tables. Their forced smiles couldn't hide the fear in their eyes as Black Dragon men maintained careful watch over their honored guests. One wrong move, and those innocent lives would pay the price. The partnership between the Port Authority and Black Dragon Trading Company represents a new era of prosperity, the governor continued, producing an elaborate document with flourish. "Tonight, we formalize this relationship with contracts that will ensure Port Haven's growth for generations to come." Sarah noted how Reed and Marcus Wong exchanged subtle signals, their men moving to secure critical positions around the room. The trap was nearly ready to spring, but not quite in the way they anticipated. Sometimes the most dangerous moment wasn't when a predator struck, but in the heartbeat before, when victory seemed assured. Yi Chen's gaze swept the room with lethal focus, his legendary instinct searching for any sign of Swift Steel's presence. But his very certainty about what to look for had become his weakness. The Ghost Blades were preparing to eliminate their opposition through carefully orchestrated violence, never suspecting that their intended victims had prepared a trap of their own. The governor lifted an ornate pen, preparing to sign the documents that would give the Black Dragons legal control over Port Haven's future. In that moment, Sarah felt the weight of her concealed weapons, remembering Master Chen's teachings about patience and precision. The Ghostblades thought they were about to achieve their greatest triumph. Instead, they were about to learn why. Legends often carried warnings about the price of overconfidence. The governor's pen hovered above the document as ghost blade operatives moved with practiced precision to their final positions. Sarah maintained her carefully crafted facade of social discomfort, while her trained senses tracked every subtle shift in the ballroom's atmosphere. Through the crowd, she caught glimpses of Agent Carter's team coordinating their own movements, maintaining cover while preparing for the signal. Yi Chen's legendary instincts must have sensed something amiss. The Master Killer's eyes swept the gathering with increasing intensity, searching for signs of the threat he knew must exist. His gaze kept returning to Sarah, drawn by subtle details his conscious mind hadn't yet assembled into recognition. If you're enjoying this tale of mounting tension and deadly recognition, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's episode reveals a moment that changes everything. Before we proceed with the signing, Governor Chen announced, his politician's smile failing to completely mask his nervous tension, I believe Mr. Reed has some additional security matters to address. Reed moved to the stage with predatory grace, his jade ring catching the light as he gestured to his men. Ghost blade specialists began securing the ballroom's exits while maintaining their servant disguises. The trap was preparing to spring, though not in the way they anticipated. Distinguished guests, Reed's voice carried calculated charm, we've received concerning reports about potential threats to tonight's celebration. For everyone's safety, we'll need to implement additional security measures. Please remain calm and cooperative as our staff secures the premises. Sarah watched Marcus Wong directing his blade masters with subtle hand signals, positioning them to control key points throughout the room. The ghost blades were executing a carefully choreographed plan, one designed to transform the elegant celebration into a killing ground. Through the crowd, she glimpsed the hostage families mounting fear as they recognized the danger building around them. Black Dragon men maintained their watch over these honored guests, ensuring their cooperation through unspoken threat. But Sarah noted how Zhang's officers had quietly positioned themselves near these tables, ready to protect innocent lives when the moment came. A simple precaution, Reed continued smoothly, though his eyes carried deadly purpose as they swept the gathering. Once the premises are secure, we can proceed with tonight's historic agreements. Yichen moved through the crowd with lethal grace, his legendary skills focused on identifying any potential resistance. Sarah felt his gaze linger on her again, drawn by instincts that had made him infamous throughout Asia. This time, something in her posture or movement must have triggered deeper suspicion. The Master Killer approached with carefully measured steps, his formal attire failing to completely disguise the deadly capability in every movement. Miss Chen, his accent carried the cultured tones of Hong Kong high society. I believe we have a matter to discuss privately, if you'd accompany me. Udi. Sarah noted how other ghost blade specialists adjusted their positions, maintaining clear lines of sight while preparing to support their legendary colleague. They thought they were witnessing Yi Chen's famous instincts, identifying a potential threat. Instead, they were about to learn why Swift Steel's reputation matched even the dreaded Death's shadow. Is something wrong? She asked, allowing anxiety to color her voice, while her trained senses tracked positions and distances. Through the crowd, she caught Zhang's signal. His teams were in final position, waiting for her response to trigger their coordinated action. A minor security concern, Yichen replied smoothly, though his eyes never stopped analyzing her movements. Though I find myself curious about certain details of your background, your arrival in Port Haven coincides with some interesting developments. Sarah maintained her facade of nervous confusion while reading the subtle signs of recognition beginning to form in Yi Chen's legendary mind. The master killer's instincts were finally assembling the pieces, understanding dawning in his cold eyes. "You move well," he continued, his voice dropping to ensure privacy. "Very well, almost as if you've had specific training. The kind of training that leaves certain marks, certain habits that most wouldn't notice. But then, noticing such details is something of a specialty of mine." Through the crowd, Sarah glimpsed Agent Carter's subtle signal. Federal teams were in position around the mansion, ready to move on her mark. The moment of decision had arrived. Maintain the deception and risk Yi Chen's growing certainty, or acknowledge the truth and trigger the trap they'd spent months preparing. "You're right," she said softly, letting her carefully maintained facade drop away. Her posture shifted subtly, revealing the deadly capability she'd kept hidden for so long. Training does leave its mark, just as reputation carries certain responsibilities. Yi Chen's eyes widened with final recognition, his legendary instincts confirming what his conscious mind had suspected. "Swift steel," he breathed, his hand moving with practiced grace toward a concealed weapon. "They said you'd retired." They were wrong," Sarah replied, her own movements carrying the precise economy that had made her notorious in ports across Asia. "Sometimes the most dangerous predator isn't the one everyone fears. Sometimes it's the one they've forgotten to fear enough." Time seemed to crystallize in the governor's ballroom as Yi Chen processed the revelation before him. The legendary killer's posture shifted imperceptibly, his formal attire no longer concealing the lethal capability in every muscle. Around them, Ghostblade specialists maintained their positions, unaware that their most famous colleague had just identified their greatest nightmare. "Interesting choice," Yi Chen said softly, his voice carrying decades of experience facing deadly opponents. "Revealing yourself now, surrounded by my best blade masters. Not the tactical decision I'd expect from someone of your reputation." Sarah allowed a cold smile to touch her lips as she sensed Zhang's teams moving into final position throughout the ballroom. "You're assuming this revelation wasn't part of a larger plan. If you're enjoying this tale of deadly revelations and calculated risks, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's episode reveals a strategy that changes everything." Through the crowd, Reed noticed the tension building between his legendary enforcer and the supposed tavern keeper, the Blackie. Dragon Leader's jade ring caught the light as he gestured subtly to his men, directing more Ghostblade specialists to secure the area. "You've changed your methods," Yi Chen observed, his keen eyes noting how Sarah maintained perfect positioning despite the gathering threats. "The swift steel I knew in Hong Kong worked alone, relied on surprise and shadow. This is different. People evolve," Sarah replied, watching Ghostblade operatives attempting to quietly clear civilians from their immediate vicinity. "Sometimes the most effective strategy isn't hiding in darkness. Sometimes it's hiding in plain sight, letting your enemies gather exactly where you want them." Understanding dawned in Yi Chen's legendary mind as he processed the implications. His gaze swept the ballroom with new awareness, noting how certain guests and servants maintained positions too tactical to be coincidence. A trap within a trap, using our own security preparations against us. "Your reputation for insight is well earned," Sarah acknowledged, her trained senses tracking multiple threats while maintaining focus on the master killer before her. "Though you're only seeing part of the picture." On the stage, Governor Chen continued his speech about Port Haven's bright future, unaware that his carefully orchestrated ceremony was about to transform into something very different. Reed, however, had noted the subtle shift in Yi Chen's posture. The Black Dragon leader began moving through the crowd with deadly purpose, his hand straying toward concealed weapons. "An impressive strategy," Yi Chen admitted, his own hands remaining relaxed but ready. but you're still outnumbered. Even assuming you have allies hidden among the guests, we have over 20 master blade fighters in position. The hostages ensure cooperation from local authorities, and you've lost the element of surprise. Sarah's smile carried dangerous certainty. Have I? You're so focused on counting blade masters that you've forgotten something crucial about Swift Steel's reputation. And what's that? I never work without a plan. The words were a signal. Throughout the ballroom, coordinated action transformed the elegant gathering into controlled chaos. Agent Carter's federal teams revealed themselves, covering exits, while Zhang's trusted officers moved to protect civilian guests. Simultaneously, Mai Lin's kitchen allies secured the lower levels where hostages were held, ensuring no innocent lives could be threatened. Yi Chen's legendary reflexes responded instantly, but Sarah had anticipated his movement. Her matched butterfly knives seemed to materialize from nowhere, their jade handles catching the light as she matched the master killer's draw with precise economy of motion. Impressive, Yi Chen acknowledged, his own blade appearing with practiced grace. But you've still made a crucial mistake. You've revealed yourself too soon, before your allies could secure their positions. One word from me, and the ghost blades will turn this ballroom into a killing ground. You're assuming they can still. Hear you, Sarah replied calmly, noting how Reed's attempt to shout orders produced no sound. Mai Lin's people had released a specially prepared compound into the ventilation system. Harmless but disorienting, making complex coordination impossible while federal agents used specialized equipment to communicate. Throughout the ballroom, Ghost Blade specialists found themselves isolated, their carefully planned tactical positions becoming individual traps as Sarah's allies moved with coordinated precision. The very security measures they'd implemented to control the celebration now worked against them, limiting their movement and response options. The governor's voice faltered as he finally registered the transformation occurring before him. Reed abandoned pretense, drawing weapons as he charged toward the stage, but Sarah's attention remained focused on Yi Chen, recognizing that the legendary killer represented the most immediate threat. You've prepared well, Yi Chen admitted, his blade moving in precise patterns that had earned him countless victories. But you've forgotten something crucial about my reputation. I've never lost a direct confrontation. Even Swift Steel must respect certain legends. Sarah's response carried the weight of years spent perfecting her art. Legends evolve, Yi Chen. Sometimes the most dangerous opponent isn't the one who never loses. Sometimes it's the one who learned from losing, who understood that true strength comes from knowing when to wait for the perfect moment to strike. The master killer's eyes narrowed as he processed her words, recognizing the reference to Hong Kong. But before he could respond, Sarah launched her attack, her matched butterfly knives moving with the precision that had made Swift Steel legendary. In her own right, the time for words had passed. Now, Port Haven's future would be decided by blade work and skill, by legends testing themselves against new realities. The governor's ballroom erupted into calculated chaos as Sarah engaged Yi Chen in direct combat. Their blades traced lethal patterns through the air, each movement carrying decades of mastery and hard-earned experience. The legendary killer's technique was flawless, every strike flowing into the next with deadly precision. But Sarah had spent years studying his methods, preparing for this exact confrontation. Your style has evolved, Yi Chen observed, his blade weaving through complex defensive patterns as he assessed her approach. The Swift Steel I knew relied more on speed than technique. This is different. And if you're enjoying this tale of legends clashing and skills tested, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's episode reveals a technique that changes everything. Around them, the larger battle unfolded with strategic precision. Agent, Carter's federal teams moved methodically through the ballroom, neutralizing Ghost Blade specialists with coordinated efficiency. The disorienting compound in the ventilation system prevented the Blade Masters from mounting an organized defense, transforming their carefully planned tactical positions into individual battles. Sarah's matched butterfly knives moved in perfect harmony as she pressed her attack, each combination designed to test Yi Chen's legendary defenses. "People change," she replied, noting how the Master Killer adjusted his stance to compensate for her unexpected patterns. "Sometimes the most dangerous opponent isn't the one who maintains old methods. Sometimes it's the one who learns to adapt." Through the controlled chaos, she glimpsed Reed attempting to rally his forces near the stage. The Black Dragon leaders. Jade Ring flashed as he engaged Detective Zhang in desperate combat, his expert blade work meeting the detective's carefully prepared countermeasures. But Sarah's focus remained on Yi Chen, recognizing that the legendary killer represented the key to victory or defeat. "Adaptation is admirable," Yi Chen acknowledged, launching a combination that had earned him countless victories in Hong Kong's back alleys. "But reputation carries weight for a reason. There are certain techniques that cannot be countered, certain patterns that ensure victory." Sarah recognized the attack sequence from careful study of Yi Chen's past encounters. The Master Killer had refined these movements to lethal perfection, creating combinations that had defeated dozens of skilled opponents. But Sarah had spent months preparing specifically for this moment, developing responses to every technique in his legendary arsenal. "Reputation is a double-edged blade," she countered, her knives moving in patterns Yi Chen had never encountered. "Sometimes the weight of legend becomes a weakness, making us predictable when we should be evolving." The Master Killer's eyes narrowed as he was forced to adapt to her unexpected approach. Around them, federal agents secured the ballroom's perimeter, while Zhang's officers protected civilian guests from the ongoing combat. Mai Lin's allies maintained control of the lower levels, ensuring the hostages remained safe from any desperate retaliation. "You planned this meticulously," Yi Chen observed, his blade testing her defenses with increasing intensity. "Using our own security measures against us, coordinating with law enforcement, even the compound affecting communication. But you've overlooked something crucial, have I?" The legendary killer's smile carried deadly certainty. "Ghost Blade Masters train for exactly these situations. Even without coordination, even outnumbered, we remain lethal. Your allies may control the ballroom, but how many will fall before victory is achieved? How many innocent lives will be risked in this confrontation?" Sarah's response came through. Precise blade work rather than words. Her knives moved in combinations that forced Yi Chen to adapt, to abandon his practiced patterns for desperate innovation. The Master Killer's legendary technique began showing signs of strain as she pressed her advantage, implementing strategies developed through months of careful study. Through the chaos, she tracked the larger battle's progress. Agent Carter's teams had secured most of the Ghost Blade specialists, their federal training proving effective against even master knife fighters when supported by proper preparation and coordination. Zhang's officers maintained control of civilian evacuations, ensuring no innocent guests were caught in the ongoing combat. Reed made a final desperate attempt to reach the stage, his blade work showing the skill that had earned him his fearsome reputation. But the Black Dragon leader found himself surrounded by federal agents, his tactical position deteriorating as his supporting forces were systematically neutralized. "You see," Yi Chen pressed, attempting to regain initiative through a particularly complex attack sequence. "Even now, chaos threatens everything. This is why Ghostblade masters train to control through fear, to prevent exactly this kind of widespread violence. Your intervention has transformed a simple ceremony into a battlefield. Sarah's matched butterfly knives moved with practiced precision as she countered his assault. "You're wrong," she replied, her technique demonstrating years of evolution, beyond the swift steel he remembered. This isn't chaos. This is justice finally reaching Port Haven, dismantling an empire built on fear and corruption. The violence tonight isn't because of my intervention. It's the inevitable result of your own methods, your own choices. The Master Killer's legendary composure showed its first crack as he recognized the truth in her words. His blade work remained exceptional, but Sarah could see uncertainty entering his movements as he processed the full scope of her strategy. The Ghost Blades had prepared for direct confrontation, for simple combat between knife masters. Instead, they faced a carefully coordinated operation that targeted the very foundations of their power. "You've changed more than your technique," Yichen acknowledged, his attacks becoming increasingly desperate as he sought any advantage. "The swift steel I knew in Hong Kong was a lone warrior fighting against corruption through direct action. This is something else entirely." Sarah's response carried the weight of lessons learned through years of experience. Sometimes the most effective strategy isn't facing evil alone. Sometimes it's building networks, coordinating with allies, and striking at exactly the right moment with exactly the right force. You taught me that in Hong Kong, though not in the way you intended. Yichen's legendary technique reached new levels of intensity as he recognized the full implications of Sarah's strategy. The Master Killer's blade moved with desperate precision, each strike carrying the weight of his fearsome reputation. But Sarah's matched butterfly knives met every attack with carefully planned counters, her evolved style forcing him to abandon practiced patterns for increasingly risky innovations. "You've trapped us completely," he acknowledged, launching another complex combination that would have overwhelmed most opponents. "Using our own security measures, our own tactical positions against us. Even my presence here was part of your plan, wasn't it?" If you're enjoying this tale of strategies revealed and legends tested, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's episode reveals a moment that changes everything. Sarah maintained perfect positioning as she responded to his assault, her knives moving in patterns developed specifically for this confrontation. The Ghost Blades brought you here because they feared Swift Steel's return. Your reputation made you the perfect counter to any lone knife fighter seeking vengeance. Through the controlled chaos of the ballroom, she tracked the larger operations in progress. Agent Carter's federal teams had secured most of the Ghostblade specialists, their careful preparation proving effective against even master knife fighters. Detective Zhang coordinated civilian evacuation while maintaining pressure on the remaining opposition. "But that's not why you really came, is it?" Sarah pressed, forcing Yichen to retreat from a particularly effective combination. "Your reputation means everything to you, the legendary killer who never loses a direct confrontation. You couldn't resist the chance to test yourself against Swift Steel." The Master Killer's eyes narrowed as she exposed his underlying motivation. "You sound very certain about my thoughts, my choices." "Because I understand pride," Sarah replied, her knives moving in perfect harmony as she maintained her advantage. "The desire to prove yourself against worthy opponents. It's what makes legends like us predictable if you know how to use that knowledge properly." Reed's desperate voice carried across the ballroom as the Black Dragon leader made a final attempt to rally his forces. "Kill the hostages. Show them the price of defiance." But Mylin's allies had already secured the mansion's lower levels, ensuring no innocent lives could be threatened. "You've changed the rules of engagement," Yichen observed, his legendary technique showing increasing strain as Sarah pressed her attack. Ghostblade masters trained to control through fear, to maintain power through threat of violence. But you've removed that option entirely. Sarah's response came through precise blade work rather than words. Her combinations forcing Yi Chen to expend precious energy on desperate defenses. The Master Killer's reputation had been built on overwhelming opponents through superior technique and conditioning, but Sarah had prepared specifically for an extended confrontation, knowing his style relied heavily on early victory. "Your entire operation depended on maintaining control," she said, noting how his movements began showing subtle signs of fatigue. The hostages, the corrupt officials, the threatened violence, all designed to prevent exactly this kind of coordinated resistance. Through the chaos, she glimpsed Agent Carter personally engaging several Ghostblade specialists near the stage. The federal agent's combat skills proved surprisingly effective, his movements suggesting extensive close quarters training. More importantly, his team maintained perfect coordination despite the ongoing combat, systematically securing the ballroom section by section. "You still haven't won," Yi Chen countered, attempting to regain initiative through increasingly aggressive combinations. "Even if you defeat me, even if you capture everyone here, the Ghostblade's influence extends far beyond Port Haven. Other masters will come seeking vengeance, drawn by the challenge of facing swift steel." Sarah's matched butterfly knives moved with deadly precision as she responded to his assault. "You're assuming I haven't planned for that as well. Tonight isn't just about defeating the Ghostblades in Port Haven. It's about exposing your entire operation, providing federal authorities with evidence of corruption reaching all the way to the governor's office." The Master Killer's legendary composure cracked further as he processed the fuller implications of her strategy. His blade work remained exceptional, but uncertainty had entered his movements as he recognized the true scope of what he faced. This wasn't just combat between knife masters, it was the systematic dismantling of an entire criminal empire. "The swift steel I knew in Hong Kong would never attempt something this ambitious," Yi Chen said, his attacks becoming increasingly desperate as fatigue mounted. "What changed? What transformed a lone blade master into someone capable of coordinating an operation of this magnitude?" Sarah's response carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. "You did. That night in Hong Kong when you forced me to watch innocent people die, you taught me that fighting alone wasn't enough. That true justice required more than just skill with a blade. Sometimes the most important lessons come from our greatest defeats." The Master Killer's eyes widened with final understanding as he recognized the full extent of his miscalculation. The Ghost Blades had brought him to Port Haven, believing his legendary skills would counter any threat from swift steel. Instead, his very presence had become part of Sarah's carefully constructed trap, his reputation helping to blind them to the true nature of what they faced. Yi Chen's legendary endurance began showing clear signs of strain as the extended confrontation took its toll. The Master Killer's blade still moved with deadly precision, but Sarah's carefully planned strategy had forced him to expend precious energy on desperate defenses. More importantly, his growing awareness of the trap he'd walked into affected his trademark composure, introducing subtle hesitations into his usually flawless technique. "You've planned for every contingency," he acknowledged, launching another complex combination that Sarah countered with practiced efficiency. "Even this extended combat serves your strategy, doesn't it? Forcing me to abandon my preferred approach for increasingly desperate innovations. If you're enjoying this tale of legends clashing and empires falling, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's episode reveals a technique that changes everything." Sarah's matched butterfly knives continued their deadly dance as she pressed her advantage, each movement designed to exploit the growing fatigue in Yi Chen's responses. The Ghost Blades brought you here because they believed your legendary skills would counter any threat. Instead, your very reputation became part of the trap. Through the controlled chaos of the ballroom, she tracked the larger operations' final stages. Agent Carter's federal teams had secured most of the Ghostblade specialists, their careful preparation proving devastatingly effective. Detective Zhang coordinated with his officers to maintain control of the perimeter, while Mylin's allies ensured the hostages remained protected. Reed made one final desperate attempt to reach the governor, his jade ring flashing as he engaged. Several federal agents in fierce combat, the Black Dragon leader's blade work showed the skill that had earned his fearsome reputation, but he found himself systematically overwhelmed by superior numbers and coordination. "You still haven't won," Yichen countered, attempting to regain initiative through increasingly aggressive movements. "Even if you defeat me, even if you expose everything here, the Ghostblade's influence reaches across continents. Other masters will come, drawn by the challenge and the promise of vengeance." Sarah's response came through precise blade work. Rather than words, her combinations forcing Yichen to expend more precious energy on desperate defenses. "You're assuming I haven't already provided federal authorities with evidence about your international operations. Tonight isn't just about Port Haven, it's about dismantling the entire network that supports operations like this." The Master Killer's legendary composure cracked further as he processed the implications. His blade moved with increasing desperation as he recognized the true scope of what he faced. This wasn't just combat between knife masters, it was the systematic destruction of everything the Ghostblades had built. "The hostages are secure," Mylin's voice carried across the ballroom, signaling another crucial phase of their plan. "Federal teams have control of the lower levels." Yichen's eyes narrowed as he launched another complex attack sequence, one that had earned him countless victories in Hong Kong's back alleys. "You've changed more than just your technique. The swift steel I knew would never risk involving others, never endanger innocent lives in her quest for justice." Sarah's matched butterfly knives moved in perfect harmony as she countered his assault, forcing him further on the defensive. "Sometimes the most important lessons come from our greatest defeats. You taught me that in Hong Kong, though not in the way you intended." The Master Killer's legendary technique reached new levels of intensity as he committed fully to one final combination. His blade traced lethal patterns through the air as he attempted to overwhelm Sarah's defenses through pure skill and determination. But Sarah had spent months preparing for exactly this moment, developing responses to every technique in his feared arsenal. "Your reputation for insight serves you well," she acknowledged, matching his movements with practiced precision while maintaining her strategic advantage. "But you've overlooked something crucial about tonight's operation." "And what's that?" Yichen demanded, his breathing growing labored as fatigue mounted. Sarah's response carried the weight of years spent perfecting her art. "The most dangerous opponent isn't always the one who never loses. Sometimes it's the one who learned from losing, who understood that true strength comes from knowing exactly when and how to strike." Her matched butterfly knives moved in a combination Yichen had never encountered, one developed specifically for this confrontation. The Master Killer's blade work remained exceptional as he attempted to counter her attack, but fatigue and uncertainty had taken their toll. His legendary technique faltered for just a moment, and in that instant, Sarah's carefully planned strategy reached its culmination. Her first strike disarmed Yichen with surgical precision, sending his weapons spinning away into the chaos of the ballroom. Her second movement brought her blades to rest at his throat, ending the confrontation with the same technical perfection that had made Swift Steel legendary in her own right. "Magnificent," Yichen acknowledged, genuine admiration entering his voice despite his defeat. "You've evolved beyond what any of us expected. The Ghostblades thought they were facing a simple knife fighter seeking revenge. Instead, Instead, they face someone who learned that true justice requires more than just skill with a blade. Sarah finished, maintaining perfect control as federal agents moved to secure the legendary killer. Sometimes it requires patience, planning, and the wisdom to know exactly when to strike. The governor's ballroom transformed from battlefield to crime scene as federal agents secured the last Ghost Blade specialists. Sarah maintained her vigilance, despite Yi Chen's surrender, years of experience having taught her that victory's aftermath could prove as dangerous as combat itself. Through the controlled chaos, she tracked the systematic implementation of justice. She'd spent months planning. Agent Carter coordinated with his teams as they processed the gathered evidence, each piece carefully documented to build an irrefutable case against the Black Dragon organization. "Governor's office is secured," he reported, approaching Sarah while maintaining professional awareness of his surroundings. "All documents relating to their operation are under federal control. If you're enjoying this tale of justice served and consequences unveiled, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's episode reveals a truth that changes everything." Reed struggled against his restraints as federal agents led him past, his jade ring now secured as evidence. The Black Dragon leader's composed facade had shattered completely, replaced by impotent fury as he witnessed his carefully constructed empire crumbling. "This changes nothing," he snarled. "You have no idea how far our influence reaches, how many powerful people will ensure this never sees court." Sarah's response carried quiet certainty. "You're assuming tonight was an isolated operation, that we haven't spent months building cases across multiple jurisdictions, documenting every connection and corrupt official involved in your organization." Detective Zhang approached, his formal attire somewhat disheveled from combat, but his bearing professional as he reported their progress. "All hostages are secure and receiving medical attention. No serious injuries. My Lin's people are providing statements about the Black Dragon's extortion operations." Through the mansion's windows, Sarah caught glimpses of more federal agents, arriving, their vehicles surrounding the property with practiced efficiency. What had begun as a carefully planned trap had transformed into a full-scale operation to dismantle one of the largest criminal enterprises on the Pacific coast. Yi Chen observed these developments with keen analysis despite his secured position. The legendary killer's tactical mind couldn't help but appreciate the full scope of what he witnessed. "You've orchestrated something unprecedented," he acknowledged. "Not just defeating the Ghost Blades in combat, but systematically dismantling our entire support structure." "A necessary evolution," Sarah replied, watching federal agents escort the governor himself toward a waiting vehicle. "Your operation in Hong Kong taught me that simply confronting evil isn't enough. True justice requires attacking the very foundations that allow corruption to flourish." Mai Lin emerged from the mansion's lower levels, her practical efficiency having proved crucial in coordinating their civilian allies. "The kitchens are secure," she reported in rapid Cantonese, "all evidence of their smuggling operation documented. And Sarah, we found something else. Records dating back years, detailing every operation, every connection. They documented everything." Sarah allowed herself a small, cold smile. "Arrogance makes us predictable. The Ghost Blades were so confident in their security, their influence, that they never considered someone might penetrate their inner circle." Agent Carter studied the gathered evidence with professional satisfaction. "This goes beyond Port Haven. These documents implicate officials across 3 states, international shipping companies, even foreign governments. We're looking at months of investigations, dozens of high-profile arrests." "The Ghost Blades will adapt," Yi Chen warned, though his tone carried more resignation than threat. "We always have. Other masters will emerge, drawn by the challenge of facing swift steel, seeking to restore what was lost here. Sarah's response demonstrated how completely she'd evolved beyond the lone knife fighter they'd known in Hong Kong. "You're still thinking like a blade master, seeing everything in terms of individual combat and personal reputation. But tonight wasn't about proving Swift Steel's skills. It was about showing that justice doesn't require legends or lone heroes. Sometimes it requires networks of honest people working together, supporting each other against corruption." Through the ballroom's elegant doors, she glimpsed more federal vehicles arriving, their lights painting Port Haven's streets in rotating patterns of blue and red. The night's operation had transformed the port town's very atmosphere, replacing fear and resignation with the first glimpses of hope. "The hostages are ready to testify," Zhang reported, his professional demeanor failing to completely hide his satisfaction. "Combined with the documented evidence and cooperative witnesses from Mai Lin's network, we have everything needed to ensure convictions." Sarah watched as federal agents led Reed toward a waiting transport vehicle, the Black Dragon. Leader's expensive suit unable to disguise his defeat. Her matched butterfly knives remained ready, despite the apparent victory, years of experience having taught her to maintain vigilance until every detail was secured. "You've won completely," Yi Chen observed, genuine admiration entering his voice despite his situation. "Not just the physical confrontation, but the larger strategic victory. The Ghost Blades invested everything in maintaining control through fear and corruption. Instead, we proved that justice can prevail when good people stand together," Sarah finished, watching Port Haven's future taking shape before her eyes. "Sometimes the most important victory isn't defeating evil in direct combat. Sometimes it's showing others that resistance is possible, that corruption can be fought through coordination and careful planning." Dawn painted Port Haven's waters in shades of gold as Sarah stood at the Silver Mist's window, watching federal agents continue their methodical work. The night's operation had transformed more than just the governor's mansion. It had fundamentally altered the port town's atmosphere, replacing fear with the first tentative signs of hope. Detective Zhang entered through the back door, his formal attire exchanged for practical working clothes as he coordinated the ongoing investigation. "Final counts are coming in," he reported, accepting a cup of Mai Lin's strong tea. 32 Ghostblade specialists in custody, including Yi Chen himself, every major Black Dragon leader captured, the governor and 12 other officials facing federal charges. If you're enjoying this tale of justice prevailing and hope restored, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow brings a new story of courage and determination. More importantly, Mai Lin added, emerging from the kitchen with fresh breakfast, the hostage families are safe. The Lin warehouse will be returned to its rightful owners. Honest merchants can operate without fear of protection demands. Sarah's matched butterfly knives rested on the bar, their jade handles catching the morning light. The weapons had served her well during the night's confrontation, but she understood that the truly important victory hadn't come through blade work alone. Agent Carter's team finished processing the mansion's documents, Zhang continued, producing a carefully organized file. Evidence of corruption reaching all the way to the state capital, international connections to criminal organizations across the Pacific. They're calling it one of the largest organized crime cases in recent history. Through the window, Sarah watched Port Haven coming alive with new energy. Merchants opened their shops without the weight of fear that had dominated recent months. Harbor workers moved with fresh purpose, no longer watching shadows for signs of Black Dragon enforcers. Yi Chen made an interesting observation before federal agents transported him, Zhang said thoughtfully. He said, "You've changed the rules of engagement completely. That Swift Steel's evolution from lone knife fighter to coalition builder represents something the Ghost Blades never anticipated." Sarah's hand unconsciously touched the jade pendant beneath her collar, Master Chen's final gift, carrying lessons about patience and precision that had taken years to fully understand. They expected me to seek revenge through direct confrontation, to challenge them blade against blade, like in Hong Kong. They never considered that defeat might teach more valuable lessons than victory. Mai Lin settled into her usual chair, her practical efficiency having proved crucial to their operation's success. The Ghost Blades built their reputation on fear and individual skill. They never understood that true strength often comes from working together, from building networks of trust and cooperation. "They're already talking about your example spreading," Zhang added. "Other ports where criminal organizations maintain control through violence and corruption. People learning that resistance is possible when communities stand together." Sarah moved to examine the documents Agent Carter had provided, detailed evidence of the Black Dragon's operations, carefully organized for maximum legal impact. "Tonight wasn't about Swift Steel's legend," she said quietly. "It was about showing that justice doesn't require lone heroes or legendary skills. Sometimes it requires patience, planning, and the courage to trust others." Through the morning light, she caught glimpses of more federal agents arriving at the harbor, teams of investigators processing evidence, documenting connections, building cases that would ensure the night's victory led to lasting change. The Ghost Blades had believed their power impregnable, protected by corruption and fear. Instead, their very confidence had become their weakness. "What happens now?" Mai Lin asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Sarah's response carried the weight of lessons learned through years of experience. "The federal investigation will continue, following evidence wherever it leads. More arrests will come as corrupt officials and criminal connections are exposed. Port Haven will need time to heal, to rebuild trust and legitimate commerce." "And Swift Steel?" Zhang inquired carefully. "Other ports might benefit from similar operations, from someone with your experience coordinating resistance against organized crime." Sarah allowed herself a small smile as she watched Port Haven's waters catching the morning sun. "Legends evolve," she said softly. "Sometimes the most powerful symbol isn't a lone knife fighter seeking justice through combat. Sometimes it's showing others that victory comes through patience, planning, and the wisdom to know that true strength often lies in working together." The morning light continued to strengthen over Port Haven as Sarah considered the future. Taking shape before her, the Ghost Blades had brought Yi Chen to Port Haven, believing his legendary skills would counter any threat from Swift Steel. Instead, his very presence had helped blind them to the true nature of what they faced. Sometimes, she reflected, the most effective strategy wasn't fighting darkness directly, but showing others how to kindle their own lights against the night. Through the windows, she watched honest merchants reclaiming their port town one shop at a time. Mai Lin coordinated with community leaders to ensure support for families affected by Black Dragon operations. Zhang worked with federal agents to document everything, building cases that would withstand any legal challenge. The jade pendant felt warm against her skin as Sarah considered Master Chen's final teachings in a new light. The blade was just a tool, he had always said. True victory came from knowing exactly when and how to strike. Tonight had proved those lessons in ways even her mentor might never have anticipated. Sometimes the most important battle wasn't won through skill with weapons, but through the courage to trust others and the wisdom to build something stronger than fear. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.